Hello and welcome to the Mindful Men podcast, a show helping men to open up about manhood. My name is Simon Rennie and my aim is to get men talking. From mental health to fatherhood and everything in between, Mindful Men creates a safe space for conversation. Now, before we get into this episode, I want to say a huge thank you for joining me. It means a world for you to join me and talk about men's issues. And if you love what you hear, please subscribe and share the episode with your mates. You can also join the conversation on Instagram and YouTube, and I'd love to connect with you there. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's get mindful. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rennie, and today we're getting mindful about mental health. If mental health discussions do trigger you, please feel free to skip this episode, that's okay. But if you do stick around and you do get triggered, make sure that you reach out to your support networks afterwards. And joining me for today's discussion, I've got Josh Binger from Gippsland, Victoria. How you going, Josh?
Yeah, good, brother. Just sitting down here in the shitty weather at the moment. It's pissing rain and it's windy, so I'm hiding inside my folks' house. So doing well, man. What about yourself?
Yeah, no, we have got an absolute perler of a day, mate. I've been out on the treadmill today. I'm going to go for a walk afterwards. I've just tuned into a new podcast with Hamish Blake. It's How Other Dads Dad. And it is hilarious. You've got to check it out if you haven't checked it out. I'm going to go listen to another episode and go for a walk.
I did used to listen to them quite a bit, so I'll check it out. I find Hamish and Andy quite funny.
Oh, they're hilarious. And he just takes it to the next level. Being dad myself, I could really tune into what he was saying and understand it. But anyway, that's another podcast. We're on the Mindful Men podcast here. Thanks so much for joining me, mate. I was fortunate to come on the Men podcast with you and share some of my stories. So I thought it'd be great to have you on my show and hear your story as well, because you are working in the mental health space. And I love having chats about men's mental health. But you also have done some work in the death industry as well. So I'm keen to explore what that is and also work that you do with Broski as well. Let's start it off and hear a bit about you and tell the audience where you grew up and some of the school life and what you did after school. What's some of those key life events for you?
Yeah, cool. So I've been a Gippsland boy pretty much my whole life. I grew up in a little town called Bryagalong. It's a bit of a mouthful, little country town, farming town full of some really good people. And yeah, went to school at the local primary school, went to Maffra High School, lived there for a bit. And then I started studying in Melbourne, studied a paramedicine degree. So I lived up in Melbourne for a few years up there while studying, did a bit of work, and now I've moved back to Maffra. I had a pretty good upbringing. My parents stayed together. I was probably brought up in a pretty low socioeconomical family, but still parents did everything they could to provide for me, and yeah, I had a pretty good life and dealt with some bullying when I was younger, which is probably where a lot of my hardships started. From primary school, grade 1, right through to probably grade 6, so the whole duration of primary school. So dealt with a lot of like mental and physical bullying from maybe one or two people, and that was relatively consistent. I didn't really understand what mental health was back then and how it was affecting me. So I just kept being a kid and whatnot. I was a chubby boy as well, so I was a pretty easy target for people. I was overweight most of my life, so pretty easy for people to poke shit at me and give me a hard time. And then moving over to Maffra in high school, I had a pretty good start there, maybe for the first year, but I was still a big boy and copped a lot of physical and verbal abuse off a group of dudes who followed me from primary school to high school, and then that group got bigger and yeah, copped a few bashings and a lot of psychological bullying as well. And that started to affect me pretty young. And that's when I really started dealing with probably depression and anxiety quite a lot. And I sort of become a bit more introverted and enclosed, built sort of a social anxiety, had a good group of mates still, but we were also all targets of that sort of bullying. So yeah, it was pretty rough. I had a bit of a hard time in high school and had a suicide attempt, which was my only probably like decent attempt at suicide when I was about 15. And then sort of going through, I just sort of lived with depression and anxiety, and it just got worse and worse. And then started experiencing some OCD stuff, which we spoke about with you and really brought to light some of the things that I was dealing with. And then, yeah, outside of school, year 11 and 12 was pretty good for me. I had a really good group of mates. A lot of the dudes who would give me a hard time left school around year 11 or year 10. So 11 and 12, I had a really good time, and I lost like a significant amount of weight then. And yeah, it got a bit better for me. And then later on in life, it came back again.
Do you remember like what the bullying was all around? Was it around your weight or was it other things as well?
Oh, it was around anything that they could poke shit at me for, man. A lot of it was my weight related bullying. Like a lot of it. People used to like put sticky notes on my back saying like fat fuck, go kill yourself, wide load, kick me, just shit like that. I learned to react. So I was very hyper aware of my situations. I was like high anxiety levels. My sympathetic drive was very high and I reacted a lot. And that's why I think I got more shit because I kept reacting. And when I was younger, I used to go to the teachers and try and do the right thing, like morally do the right thing. And then it learned that, punching people sort of worked a bit more. But then, I mean, I'd cop it back anyway. So I didn't really win in that situation. I remember like I hit a kid in the face. He was giving me a hard time for months. And he actually pushed me over and I punched him in the face and I got suspended and he didn't. So I felt like throughout all of high school, no matter what I did, I couldn't win. And it sort of got on top of me a bit there at one stage. And being a young boy, I couldn't really process the emotions. I didn't know how to process emotions and I didn't know what to do really, because no matter what I did, I'd get punished. So sort of lose-lose.
Did you talk about it with your parents?
My mum and dad were really supportive. They knew like what was going on. And because I'm an only child, I was very close to my parents. My old man, who we're really close now, probably close when I was younger and we're close now, but through that period in time, I had a lot of anger issues and from unexpressed emotion and shit building up. He didn't really know how to deal with it because he's like an old school sort of man. He doesn't really express emotion at all. So his job, or what he did to make things better, was provide for the family. That's all he knew how to do. And he's a good man for that. But so I was really close with my mum, and mum sort of probably had a lot more influences on me. Hence why I used to be more of a feminine guy. And yeah, so I did speak with my parents a bit, but probably like when I was very depressed and I attempted suicide, like they probably didn't know the extent of it then. Not many people did really know the extent of it then.
Without going into too much detail around the suicide attempt, what was going through your mind at that time? Did you think that was the only way out? How did you get through that as well?
Yeah, so it did feel like the only way out. I sort of blocked it out of my mind for a long time and pretty traumatic experience. I can't really remember what I was feeling that much. I know a lot of people say they feel empty with depression and, usually before they attempt suicide. I didn't really feel empty. I just felt like a lot of pain, obviously not physical pain. I was self-harming a little bit at that point in time as well, which was sort of crazy to me because that actually felt like it eased my pain. Not significant self-harming. No, I wouldn't say like dangerous self-harming, but just like cutting and that sort of thing. And yeah, I just felt a lot of pain, dude. I don't know how to really explain. It just felt heavy. Like life felt very heavy. And like, I just felt trapped, which is what I've felt most of my life. I felt very trapped and just in my body. Like I couldn't feel happiness and I couldn't really get rid of that stress and that anxiety. It just sort of beat me down. And yeah, I just felt horrible, like that sick feeling you get in your stomach. That was there all the time. And I was very tired. I wasn't sleeping. I was drinking a lot. I started drinking when I was about 13 and no illicit drug use, but I drank a lot, like bottles of scotch, stuff like that. And that sort of, I didn't understand at the time, but that debilitated my mental health as well. Obviously, that's probably when I was having the most fun, really, was when I was drinking. But I'd also have like emotional breakdowns and aggressive outbursts at that age, just punch walls and just dumb shit like that to get my anger out. So yeah, and then I attempted suicide once, and I believe it was a legitimate attempt. It didn't go well, but I had no real ongoing damage or any issues with that. No one really knows about it at all except my parents and my ex-partner. No one else knows about it at all. I don't think I've even spoken about it on a podcast before. This is the first potty I've been on. So the way I got through it was, I don't really know, man. I didn't really see a psychologist. I didn't do any self-help stuff. I didn't look after myself at all. It scared me when I did it. And I just thought, fuck, not doing that again. And it really did scare me quite a bit. So I just sort of went through that suffering, like probably mental suffering, for quite some time until around year 11, year 12. And life picked up a lot for me then. And then I went downhill again.
So year 11, year 12 was better. Obviously the guys, some of those guys had moved on and left school. Talk us through the end of school. And then you said you went off to do paramedicine. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the end of school was really good. I had sort of made some friends with a really good bunch of guys that all of them like drinking and using some party drugs and stuff, but they're all really good dudes. They treated me well. They were well liked for most of the school. One of them became a PT, Tommy, and Tommy was pretty straight shooter, pretty clean guy. And he's gone off to do some amazing things. So I started PTing with him and I dropped about 30 kilos. And, with that, I guess A lot of other problems started to fix themselves. I was sort of interacting with women more. I felt mentally better. I was doing a lot of training. I trained twice a day, 6 days a week, and put on a lot of muscle. I just felt really good about myself, very confident. And so that was good. End of the school. I didn't do well in year 12. I pretty much failed. My ATAR was like 39. I think I nearly failed year 12. I wasn't academic at all. I think because I had a lot of issues throughout that time in my life, I didn't really retain a lot of information. And then I left school, and before I went to do paramedicine, I worked with the forestry. So I got a job a week after I finished year 12 with forest fire management. And I worked with them for 5 years, and that was life-changing for me because I worked with a really good bunch of people. And my fitness sort of went down when I started working there, but I maintained it somewhat. And yeah, I had a good 4 or 5 years there. And then I started studying paramedicine and moved to Melbourne. And it was good for a little bit. I moved in with a guy who used to be one of my best friends in high school. I moved in with him, and he seemed like a straight shooter at the time, but he wasn't. He was a drug user, and he stole me car and fucked me car up. And that's when my mental health, in the first year of uni started going downhill. I also had a lot of chronic illness problems, which is a bit crazy, but I had a pen lid stuck in my right lung, which I wasn't aware about, which was occluding 90% of me right bronchus, probably since a child. So I was always diagnosed with asthma. But once I started going to uni, I started getting really sick and got lung infections every couple of weeks. I was constantly on antibiotics, just coughing up blood every day. They had no idea what was wrong with me at all. So I was spending lots of money going to the doctor. I stopped going to the doctors, and I just sort of lived with it. But with that became a decrease in exercise, an increase in stress and like food-related or stress-related eating. And then the mental health came back and really started to haunt me again.
Yeah, and for anyone who's watching this on YouTube, we'll put it up on YouTube as well. I did have a chuckle about the pen lid story because you tell the story on your podcast, and it is a fascinating story, and one where you were quite crook and people couldn't figure out what was going on, and it ended up being this pen lid. Did you ever work out how you got a pen lid stuck inside of you?
Nah. I was talking to my folks about it. I've been diagnosed with asthma as a young child, and they reckon I've obviously picked a pen lid up off the ground. I was chewing it. I've aspirated it as a young child. It's got stuck. And what actually happened was I lived with a constant wheeze and a cough for my whole life. But what actually happened was the scar tissue started sort of healing over time. And that's what started occluding my right bronchus. It sort of fell down my lung like that. And then the scar tissue went over the top of it and started occluding it. I was constantly hypoxic, so I had lack of oxygen I'm sure I killed a few brain cells there. I'd try and exercise. I'd collapse, from lack of oxygen, coughing up blood every day. I had to sleep sitting up in a chair because if I'd laid down, I couldn't breathe. And then that was obviously accompanied, as I said, with constant lung infections, which was really it was horrible. It was pretty bad. I laugh about it now. But in the time, it was fucking terrible. No matter what I did, I couldn't get better. I just got worse. I was on tons of medication. My GP actually told me that, I could die. I was getting very concerned. And that's when I went on a wait list for a lung specialist. That was an 11-month wait. And then I got to the point that I was that sick. I became septic and had several presentations to the hospital and several IV antibiotics. And then I just decided to pay for a private specialist, which was the best thing I ever did. It was fucking expensive. It was like $500 an appointment, and you didn't get any money back. And it was like a 15-minute appointment. But he saved my life. He sort of looked at it straight away and was like, nah, we need to fucking do this, and this. Bulk testing, like cystic fibrosis, COPD, all these other medical conditions that affect your respiratory. I think I had like TB. They thought I had lung cancer at one point, which was terrible as well. Thinking, you're going to die with lung cancer. It was fucking horrible. So yeah, I went in for a bronchoscopy when they put a camera down your throat and they have a look at what's going on. And they wanted to take some samples, flush my lungs out. It's meant to take 15 minutes. They knocked me out unconscious. I woke up halfway through the procedure because obviously they've gone down. They've gone, fuck, we found something. So they decided to cut it out then and there. They assessed it and thought it was safe enough. But I actually woke up halfway through the procedure, sat up on a table and coughed up a shit ton of blood. And I thought they dropped something down me lung. I don't know what the fuck. I was panicking. I was freaking out. They resedated me, cut it out, and then got an infection after that. And then probably a month later, I was fine, off all medications. But the mental impact from that was long lasting. I didn't realize how much of an impact that had on me.
Wow. It just goes to show sometimes we get to a point where we just need to pay that $500, as expensive as it was. By doing that, not only did you prioritize your physical health, but that's helped conceptualize things from a mental perspective as well, because it was so impactful in your life. It is an amazing story just to listen to it. And you do a great job on your podcast as well. There is an episode dedicated to it. But often we disregard things as guys, particularly. We disregard our health and well-being and go, I'm not pay for that. I'm not going to pay for that. And look what happened when you did come to that realization that you needed to sort it out. You got the help you needed and you got the answers that you needed as well. You didn't have to think about it. And somebody just said, this is what's going on and this is how we can help.
Yeah, I'd seen a lot of lung specialists, public. I think that was a big difference between private and public for me was the quality in people you see. I think the public system's pretty good, but this guy, his name was Dr. James Bartlett. He's based out of Werribee Respiratory Clinic. They actually did a case study on my case and was presented to people in different countries and all that sort of shit because no one could believe that I was still alive. And yeah, I encourage people, if you've got something wrong, don't put it off. I had a few other chronic issues, like I've got a low back condition, which I recently found out was non-operable and will just constantly provide me pain for the rest of my life. And I put off that getting managed for probably 4 or 5 years because I didn't want to know. And I didn't want to spend the money. I think it was the big thing because I didn't have a lot of money back then. I really struggled. I think you should definitely prioritize your health. And if something's really bothering you and it's consuming a lot of your thought processes, that consumes energy, it messes with your mental health, like just get it sorted. Just deal with it. Because if pretending nothing's wrong or pretending that it's not bothering you and whatnot, it just gets you nowhere. And you just don't realize how much it bothers you.
Yeah. So you've been on a mental health journey for quite some time, right? Keen to hear from your perspective. What does having good mental health mean to you?
So good mental health, what does it mean to me? So there's a few things. I don't think we can always be like on our A game. I think people perceive people with good mental health to always be well. I don't think that's the case. I think we all have our hard times and our struggles. But good mental health, personally means to me, and I relate it back to my physical health quite a lot because my physical health has always been a problem. And that's probably been the number one thing that's affected my mental health. And they've sort of bounced off each other. So to me, good physical health is a big one. It's probably the number one thing for me. But also just your ability to cope with what comes at you, building a good resilience, being able to process emotions well. That sort of stuff I think is very important. And I think if you don't have good mental health, you can't do those things. And you also want to have a good quality of life and function well in society and be proud of what you do. And that all encompasses good mental health. If you don't have good mental health, then you can't do any of those things. I've always related it back to having a good quality of life.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you said there without saying that is also good mental health can be reflection on what's going on as well. You said there an acknowledgement that it's not always good as well, that there are peaks and troughs. And I look at it as a bit of a roller coaster, some days are up, some days are down. But as long as you're tuning into that, I think that's a good thing to do because it could recognize that maybe there's something in your life that's lacking at the moment. Maybe you're drinking too much, maybe you're eating the wrong foods, maybe you're not exercising, you're not sleeping, maybe you're having a shit time at work and you need to resolve that or in a relationship. And it's the reflective part, I think, which brings about good mental health through recognizing the things that are triggering you at that point in time.
Yeah, I agree. I think having a good routine, don't eat well for your body, eat well for your mind, because all that's intertwined. If you're not eating good, and I'm still overweight and I'm very aware of that, but I also used to be 155 kilos and, not able to function and my mental health was absolutely terrible. So eat well for your mind as well, not just for your body, because all those work together. Good routines, good connection with people, good support systems. You need all those sorts of things to function well. And people say, oh, well, I'm introverted, but sitting inside for 3 weeks at a time, not talking to anyone's not good for you. I'm somewhat introverted as well, but I still have good social connections. I put myself in situations where I might challenge myself, but not where I feel super uncomfortable to the point I'll have an anxious breakdown. And so there's those things as well. If you don't have a good routine, you can have a bad time because everything's chaos.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm interested to know, so you've gone through all these physical things and seen lots of specialists. When was the first time that you went and spoke to someone about what's happening mentally?
Yeah, so I guess I was pretty open with some of it with my parents, but my ex-partner who I lived with when I was at uni, she was a really good support for me. And undoubtedly, my mental health took a big toll on her as well. It definitely affected her massively, which is completely understandable. So I was pretty open with her. Obviously, she's seen some of the things I was doing. I suffer from, and not so much anymore, OCD and trichotillomania. And like ripping out all my beard hair. I was doing all those sorts of behaviors, and I was also like eating lots of food, and which was affecting her as well because she was engaging in the same behaviors. But she was very aware of my struggles. She was around when, I had my emotional breakdowns and whatnot. So, she's seen it all the time. So in terms of that, I was probably around my first year of uni when we moved in together. So I talked to her about it a bit, but I also like told her, I'm fine, I'll be right. And, don't worry about it. But obviously I wasn't. So the first time I opened up to a psychologist was probably around like just after I finished uni. I'd split up with my ex and I was in a very, very bad headspace. And I thought I'd go and see a psychologist, and I seen a couple that were shit. And I found one who was really, really good. And I seen her once a week and whatnot. So that was really good. And I found like after the sessions, I'd have a different perspective on myself, which I find psychologists are very good for. People often say like they don't care, they're not paying you. And it's like, well, it doesn't really matter if they don't care. In my opinion, I don't think that's the importance of it. I think the importance is what they teach you. Their job is to teach you things and show you like different perspectives on yourself and why you're doing things. So like some psychologists do care and they're really good psychologists, but like you also do pay them. So they're there because they're getting paid. But yeah, in my opinion, that was probably the best interaction I had with a psychologist at that time. She helped me through some pretty hard times, but she left without any warning. She had a family crisis come up. So then that sort of threw me back in the shit wagon a bit when I lost that structure and routine. And then I didn't want to go through the process of looking for another good psychologist. So I didn't. And it was quite a time before I started seeing another one.
Yeah, you mentioned going around and having to find one and having some shit ones, basically. Very similar to my journey over the 10 years, trying to find the right fit. What's some of the things that you did to recognize that they weren't the right fit for you? Was there some red flags that you were seeing?
Yeah, I think like I just didn't feel comfortable. Like they weren't very welcoming. One of them, the first one I ever seen, literally I went there and she printed off like, it was like 68, 69 pages of fucking like content of just like, what is depression? How do you manage it? What is anxiety? What is PTSD? Like all this random shit. I did a test which showed I was severely depressed, which is funny because when you go there, like obviously you're going to test bad because you're in a bad mindset. But I was pretty depressed. But then, she said, go home and read this. And there was $140. And I was just like, no connection. She didn't really give a fuck. Like she didn't like want to know how I was feeling and what was going on so we could start figuring things out. So that was a red flag for me. Just another couple I just didn't feel comfortable around. I don't know what it was, maybe like personality clashes or just differences. I wanted to be told like straight up, like what's going on? What do you think's going on? What am I doing wrong? What could I be doing better? What behaviors do I need to be impacted? Like, I just like being told straight up in a sense. I don't like beating around the bush. I'm not really a holistic approach kind of person. That's just me. Like in terms of psychology, like I'm not a holistic approach. I'm a bit more factual and science-based person. So I wanted to, like if there was therapies to do like CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy or, habit reversal therapies, that sort of thing, that's what I wanted to do. And the psychologist I was seeing, she was really good. She identified problems immediately from my childhood, things that I'd blacked out and I knew had happened just with the bullying and stuff. I just never addressed it. And she's like, this is where you've come unstuck. We need to sort that out before we can move forward. I found that very helpful.
Yeah, wonderful. And it highlights a very valid point is that we can try different therapy styles or therapists and fail. But the key is to keep going, getting back on the wagon, trying to find the right fit. And you do get to a point where you become overloaded, like when your therapist left and then you didn't want to go through that process again immediately. Yeah. And I've done something similar, like where I just didn't want to talk about it because I felt like I was talking about the same thing just with different therapists. But over time, you find the ones that you connect with and you recognize, okay, yeah, this is the kind of therapist I'm looking for. Someone who can get straight to the point, perhaps, or someone who specializes in a certain type of therapy as well. Like I've done the CBT thing, but it wasn't until I found mindfulness through one therapist through my burnout story, but then trying to deal with OCD, I found someone who did with exposure response prevention, which was really useful for OCD. And so just finding the right fit. And I think it's not until you trial and error that you can work out what works for you. So I'm glad that you shared that journey as well, because we can often feel dejected. And we try it once, we pay $140 or $200 or $500, and then you go, oh, that wasn't what I expected. So you kind of hesitate to go again, but it is really about trial and error.
I agree. I think like some people might want a holistic approach to their mental health, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just what works for you. I mean, that's with anything. Like it's what works for you as long as you're not hurting people while you're doing it. I know like Price puts a lot of people off, but there are a lot of government funded programs out there to, support people. So there's one called Rural Health Connect. If you go see a GP, get a mental health plan, then they'll send it off to Rural Health Connect, or you can send it off to Rural Health Connect and then engage in 10 free sessions with a psychologist, which can be up to 20 that's paid by the government. I'm not sponsored or anything by them. I've used it before, and maybe there's heaps of psychologists you literally can pick online. I want to help with OCD, I want to help with depression, I want to help with behavioral disorder or whatever. And then it'll bring up the psychologists that specialize in that field. I was using that up until recently, and I had a very good psychologist and it was very successful. So don't think you have to go and pay, 200, because psychologists are expensive. Don't think you have to go and pay a fortune to see a psychologist. There are always other alternatives for people as well.
Yeah, definitely. Shout out to anyone who does want to sponsor this episode.
Bloody oath, yeah. Just remember, On the Mend podcast.
Now, I want to get back to uni and why paramedicine. Why did you pick that particular degree to go for?
Yeah, probably a lot of personality. As I said before, I'm probably a bit more of a feminine guy. So I've got a lot of, I like connecting with people. I'm very good at tuning into empathy and sympathy and those sorts of things. A lot of stuff I've learned off my mum. So I was in the CFA, Country Fire Authority, when I was younger as a volunteer. I loved it. It was definitely part of my identity, and sort of in a small community, builds a family. It was really good. I moved on to the SES for a little bit. I didn't really grow up wanting to be a paramedic. Like everyone always says that, I just knew like when I was younger. That wasn't really me. As I said, I did bad in year 12 and I never thought I could sort of go to uni. And then I was down in Melbourne with my ex-girlfriend at the time. She was looking at uni courses and there's a paramedic stall there. And, I've always had a lot of respect for paramedics and, I just never thought I could do it. And I went and spoke to them, and one of them was in a CFA. So I built a bit of a rapport with him that way and said, you could be a paramedic, dude. I was like, no, like I did real shit at uni. He's like, there's other ways around it. And sure enough, literally applied with the Victoria University mature age program. And within 2 weeks, I was enrolled in the degree. I did pretty well in uni, like I averaged HDs, and that was really good for my mental health. It was stressful. And I worked very hard with a group of people who worked very hard as well. And it was very stressful and, it wasn't a good time in my life, but the uni really gave me something to focus on. It gave me structure. It gave me routine. And even though I was unwell at the time, it sort of gave me something to look forward to and goals to achieve. And so I'm very grateful I picked that path. And I didn't know if I'd really love it that much. I was volunteering for the ambulance service. I forgot to mention. I did volunteer for the ambulance service as like a first responder for a few years, which is definitely relevant. I did enjoy that. So I thought I might enjoy doing paramedicine as well. So I sort of went down that path and got a job, and, it's quite hard to get a job as a paramedic. So that was another stressful part of it as well. It's very, very difficult. Up until COVID, it was very difficult. And and it was, the first year's hard and I started doing it and I really enjoy it. Like it's quite good. Some things are, harder than others in the job and there's definitely challenges, but it's a pretty good job. You get looked after well. And I love talking to people, dude. I fucking love talking to people. And, if you work with a good person who's done well with, you have a bit of banter with the people you see, your patients, and they just love it. I enjoy looking after people as well. And that's definitely part of my feminine side, I think.
For all the guys out there or anyone out there who didn't do well at year 12 and didn't get a great score and to get into uni, talk us through like the process of applying. Did you have to do any prerequisite courses to say that you could do university? What was that process like?
So I applied for a couple of unis. I didn't get into ACU and I didn't get into Monash because they still look at your score regardless if it's through mature age pathway. I did get offered positions there, but I had to do a prerequisite diploma in nursing, which if I went back, I'd probably do it. I really think that would have built a better foundation as a paramedic doing some nursing as well. But I literally just went on to VU, Victoria University's website. At the time, I thought it was one of the best unis for paramedicine and it had a really good reputation, which went downhill towards the end of my degree. But anyways, it said apply as a mature age. I filled out an application. I had a bit of experience. Obviously, I was volunteering for the ambulance service at that point. And I was in the CFA. I dedicated like some of my studies at school. Like we had a CFA course at school, which I did, and I did a bit of volunteering. So I just put that in this application, sent it in. I honestly didn't think I'd get in. Like I was like, this isn't going to work. Like paramedicine has a pretty high ATAR score, and I thought they'd probably still look at it anyways, but they didn't. And they said, no, we're happy to have you. It's funny, dude. We had people in that degree who fucking did awesome in high school and dropped out within the first 6 months or failed pharmacology because it doesn't really, in my opinion, you need to be able to be dedicated to something and you need to study hard. Like if you're not academically where you need to be, you have to study hard and you just have to accept that. And maybe you just do more than other people do. I know me and my mates were pulling 14-hour days before exams, like every day. We'd get up early, we'd go into Footscray University, we'd study, we'd drink coffee, we'd go to Macca's when all the coffee places had closed, we'd get more coffee, we'd get burgers, and we'd just study. And they all did well. Like one of my mates, Ryan, who's one of my best mates, if not my best mate, probably he did the best out of the whole degree, and he worked very, very hard. And we just had to do that because you just got to. If you think you're going to go to uni and not try, or you think it's going to be easy, you're going to go there to drink, you're not going to do well, in my opinion, unless you're super smart and, you know, you can retain information, you got a high IQ, you can interpret things easily. But yeah, there's a process. Just do the process, get there, work hard. You'll get into a degree. You don't need a good ATAR to get into a degree. Just work hard and dedicate yourself to it. And you'll do well. Simple as that. You don't have to be super intelligent to do a degree. You just need to put in the time and effort.
Do you think going in as a mature age student, though, really helped you because you'd had some life experience? I dropped out of year 12 as well, went through a big depression after a relationship breakdown, went back and did year 13 and got the score to get into uni. But then I kind of just breezed through my undergrad, not really trying a whole bunch. But it wasn't until I returned to do my Masters of Social Work as a mid-30-year-old that I actually knuckled down and go, I'm actually here for a reason, not just to get a piece of paper. Like I'm here to change lives and change careers and better myself. Do you think mature age study helped you in that sense?
Yeah, man. I think mature age study was fantastic. But you can tell the people who come straight out of high school and they struggle. Like some of them struggle quite a bit because all they know is school. They haven't got much life experience. It's not their fault. Like that's how the education system pushes you. So I think it's good to, if you don't know what to do, don't get forced into going out and doing a degree. I think that's a bad idea. I think take a couple of years to yourself, figure out what you want to do, travel if you want, or get a job and figure out what you like and don't like. It's hard coming straight out of high school. The world expects you to have everything in line and understand what you want to do. And it's okay not to understand. You're still young. You're very fucking young. Like you've got ages. You don't have to stress too much about it. So yeah, I think coming out and working, like as I said, I worked in a really, really good job. It was an amazing job as a fiery on summer crew. And I learned what I liked and didn't like. And I learned more about myself and where I want to go. And then I could retain that knowledge and go and do something with it. So I think, yeah, getting some life experience is good. And I think like even working from a young age, I was working before I was 14 and 9 months, you know, like building that sort of resilience and hard work in you is very important as well. Like if you're sitting at home and you're not doing stuff, it's building foundations around you that aren't good. You're going to be lazy. You're not going to do the right things for yourself. So working's good for you. Like it's good to get out and make friends and get out in society as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now you finished the degree. Did you go from there into the death industry? And what is the death industry? Tell us about this and how'd you land in it?
Yeah. So I struggled to get a job. So I was working with the ambulance services. Oh, they call it volunteering, but I was working with them through uni. You get paid, but only if you go on call outs. I guess it works. So I was working with them, but I really struggled to get a job anywhere. Besides working in fire and volunteering and that sort of thing, I didn't really have much experience in retail or anything like that. So I struggled to get a job. And I remember I was talking to my mate, he was a paramedicine student, and he said, like, I'm working in this job for this company that essentially investigate people who have died, like unforeseen death circumstances, whatever. So they're located in Melbourne. So I was working for them. He was working for them and he said, you know, come and apply. And I had been exposed to deceased people before through obviously the CFA and the ambulance service and, you know, a couple other situations. So I applied for that, got an interview pretty much straight away. And that was in the second year, start of third year at uni.
Yeah.
And the job essentially was called a transfer service, but essentially you would go up and pick deceased people up from where they've died, speak to their families and transport them to facility where the death would be investigated. So essentially that was my job. I worked there for about 18 months. It was a good job. It's not for everyone. I mean, people would come and last a day. You were seeing quite a lot of like horrific things, like on a regular basis. I know we would pick up like more often than not, we'd probably do like 5 to 8 bodies a day, picking up deceased. And they would, you know, it could be anything from a heart attack to, you know, a child to a suicide to a homicide, motor vehicle accidents, to picking up from a hospital where someone's passed away and it needs to be investigated more. So yeah, it was hyper exposure. It was very high exposure very often. I was there with COVID. So I was working like massive amounts, like probably 6 days a week doing that. And because I couldn't see my family or friends and I just split up with my ex. It was a good gig. It definitely shaped me into a different person and it gave me a different perspective on life. I'm probably not so much of an idealist now than a realist. And I think like that sort of industry hides a lot of things from people. Like people know really fuck all about what's going on. It's very well hidden. The only point you really know about us is if we're on the news or if you're dealing with us from a family member or a friend or something like that. I think the most important thing that that job taught me was about suicides. We did suicides every day. So I was picking up people often in, different circumstances, but often horrific circumstances where they had taken their life. Most of them were men. I think that it shaped me into the mindset that this is a really big fucking problem and that something needs to be done about it. And that sort of changed my mindset.
Yeah. Did that being deceased, or did that have an impact on your mental health?
Yes, it did. Not to the extent that I think a lot of people like that did that job. It did. There's a lot of people there who had a lot of problems. But for me, it was more, it just reinforced that I was constantly on edge. Like you go to people who are walking down the street and got hit by a car and doing nothing wrong. And just, like maybe a car hit a pothole and ran off the road and hit someone and killed, father and daughter or something like that. So like it just put me like on edge, like very in my sympathetic drive, very ready to respond to things, which I've always been in, but that reinforced it quite a lot. And it also reinforced that, the world's kind of fucked up as well, which is not a great outlook. But the thing is, when you're doing that stuff every single day, you sort of see more bad shit than you see good shit. And that sort of changes your mindset. I tried to have a very positive perspective at work. I really enjoyed talking to the families and talking through the process. I really enjoyed giving the person care. Now, I didn't really see the people who had died as people, but I still treated them like people and very respectfully. I allowed the family to say goodbye and give them as good as experience as they could have in that situation. So I learned a lot from that job, and it definitely did keep me in that sympathetic drive. And, like if I'm walking down the street now, and I was talking about this with my psychologist about a month ago before I finished up with her, if I'm like in that mindset, I'm constantly like looking around. I'm constantly hyper aware. I know if I go to like a football game, for example, I'm like worried about terrorist attacks and like what's going to happen. Like everyone's just enjoying the game and I'm constantly looking for exits and, that sort of thing. And in the long term, that will have a detrimental effect on my mental health. Like I get burnt out quite a lot and quite easily because I'm so fucking like up in my head. And it does take a toll on the people around me as well because, they're just enjoying their day. And I'm like, fuck. I wouldn't say paranoid, just because that was my normal, that was my reality. And so that's my reality now. And I've got to learn that that's no longer my reality and that I need to get out of that mindset and be a bit more chilled.
Yeah, I experienced something similar. So not in the death industry, obviously. I've never worked in that industry, but in a public service, for a long time, I did kind of like compliance activities, particularly in the immigration space. We used to work for Australian Border Force, and so we'd be doing investigations on companies and people all the time, and responding to allegations of fraud. And so because I was doing that day in, day out, and my mindset shifted into one of who's doing the dodge here, or who's not being compliant here, or everyone's bad. And like what you were saying, very similar in terms of when you're in that kind of environment, your mindset does shift. And then it wasn't until I moved from that job into where I was working with the NDIS space, where I purposely said, I'm really excited about this job because it's not in fraud. It's not investigating people. It's actually helping people. And then I could flip the script and start to see the good in people. And other people would next to me, they'd be like, oh, Simon, there's so much fraud in this industry. I'm like, you don't know anything about fraud. We're here to help people. We're not here investigating. I've been around that kind of work before. You've been in the death industry before. You've seen the bad in people. Not all the time. There was, as you said, there was accidents as well. When you're in an environment, it does certainly have a way of impacting your mindset, and how to flip that. It can be very challenging as well. How did you flip it? Did you stay in that job, or have you moved on from that job?
I'm a paramedic now. I don't think I actually have flipped it really. I think it's an ongoing thing because it was like, even with the CFA, even with the fireys, like I had a couple of close calls with them where, could have died, that sort of stuff. For the ambulance service, you still see things that can affect you. All these industries, it requires a specific type of person, I think, who's ready to respond and act at a moment's notice. So all these things, they still affect me and it's still my reality, I guess. I'm just learning to be in the moment a bit more and not be as on edge and ready to react. So It's very difficult for me because even with the bullying that put me in that drive, I'm constantly in that mindset. And it's very difficult for me to not to be in there because it's been so long term. It's been pretty much the majority of my life I've been like that. So I'm just taking it day by day, really. And just like if I feel heightened, I do something to bring myself out of it. So I might go for a run. Exercise for me is the biggest thing, like physical exercise, because it gets rid of all that sort of anxious feeling, gets rid of all those like your adrenaline and your hormones that keep you on edge in that sympathetic system. It reduces all them, fills your body full of feel good hormones, and and then I can rest and relax a little bit more. So that was part of it as well. I mean, I wasn't exercising and I wasn't doing anything with all that built up energy. I was just sitting there constantly anxious. I remember I used to sit there and shake like really bad. And like with my weight and stuff like that, I used a lot of avoidance techniques. Like I wouldn't go out. I'd just lock myself in home and I'd just sit there and shake and be really anxious. Like my anxiety is fucking still a problem and still something I'm going to have to deal with long term. So yeah, I'm not over it at all. I'm really not. And it's only been working on that and aware of it, consciously aware of it over the last couple of months on how much it really affects me. And that's just because it's my reality, really. Like it's my built-in reality, and I need to take myself out of that reality and over time and build a new one, really.
Yeah. And you mentioned before you try to ground yourself or be in the moment. What's some of the strategies you use to do that?
Yeah, so I used to meditate quite a bit. I don't really enjoy meditation that much, if I'm going to be honest with you. I really struggle to do it. And like I used to do it really well, but I just sort of got bored of it. I don't know. Like everyone always says, oh, like we should meditate. And I believe it's an effective strategy for some people, but I do music meditation because my brain's very active. I really struggle not to think. So I do a bit of music meditation, do cold water therapy as well, which not every day, but most days I do. And I find that very helpful because in that moment, you're just thinking about that. It's sort of a meditation itself because your ability is not to think about anything. So you've got to sort of just focus on your breathing. And then that's how I incorporate my breathing. So I do the 4-7-8 method. So I find my breathing, it helps quite a lot as well. And then just exercise. I've probably dropped 50 kilos. So I'm still in the overweight category, but I'm getting to the point now I'm coming down from that and out of the obesity category and maybe just a bit overweight and working on those things. So maybe more so that sort of stuff. I also do other things, like I have hobbies, like I go camping a lot, but that's probably not really a mindful technique, mindfulness, bringing myself into the moment technique. And then the other thing's gratitude. Gratitude's a big thing for me as well.
Talk us through your gratitude strategy, because I know a lot of people struggle in this space.
Yeah. So, I mean, gratitude can be really easy. I usually journal 3 things I'm grateful for each morning. Sometimes I forget, and that's fine. But if I forget, I just do it in my head. So I did a podcast on this the other day about comparative gratitude. And I think it's a healthy thing. I don't think comparing yourself to people all the time is healthy at all. But I think it's better to look at in comparison to what some people have and what you have as well. So I use a thing called the Soulful Man, a dude who, has a fucking hard life, essentially. I'm not going to go right into it, but has a hard fucking life. And I just compare myself to that. And it makes me feel better because then I start looking at everything I do have and rather than what I don't have. It's really, really, really easy to get stuck in the mindset like I don't have a boat. I was in this mindset a couple of months ago, like, I really want a boat. I want a jet ski. I want all these materialistic things. And it brought me down heaps. Like I felt like shit. I was like, fuck, dude, like I'm not getting anywhere. I don't have a house. I don't have this. I don't have that. Like, but then I started thinking, well, I do have a roof over my head. Like it's basic, but I have it. Lots of people don't have that. I have access to clean drinking water. Like the water, it runs down this fucking beautiful creek out of the high country, goes to a water treatment facility, and then out of my tap. And, and then it can be hot within 10 seconds and I can have a hot shower and use fucking goat soap that's been manufactured, to make my skin nice and, just stuff like that. Like if you really start breaking it down and thinking about what you do have rather than what you don't, it makes you feel better. Like it's very easy to get stuck in I'm not making 500,000 a year. I don't have a supermodel girlfriend, because that's what we see a lot of times as well. We see that on social media. A lot of influencers, a lot of entrepreneurs, pushing this, in my opinion, somewhat bullshit lifestyle that is not the case for the majority of people. And you sort of got to get out of that mindset and just realize what you do have.
The comparative gratitude, do you ever compare yourself to where you were 10, 15, 20 years ago and compare that gratitude?
100%. Yeah, I do that as well. Like it's really good. And that's important for growth and like reflection of goals as well. 4 years ago, I was 155 kilos and depressed as fuck and, I had suicidal behaviors and ideation. So, whereas I don't really deal with a lot of that now and I don't have to stress about that much. Comparative gratitude's very important as well in that sense.
If you feel bad about comparing yourself to the Joneses, be your own Jones. Your own journey.
Exactly, yeah. And that's a very healthy method of doing it as well. And I want to make it clear, it's not about like if you compare yourself to people all the time, like this person's got a better life and stuff, that's not helpful. It's not helpful. I more use it for like reflecting on all the good things I have, I guess. Like I think it's helpful then. I don't think it's helpful to just compare yourself to people all the time. It's not healthy at all.
I know a lot of people struggle in this space and in gratitude, but I think what's coming up for me for your story is I'm grateful for that you have this story to tell, that you're sharing it with the Mindful Men community and your own community as well through on the Men podcast and through your social media. And then that tells another bloke out there who's bottled it up for years. For me, it was 20 years. And he goes, oh, fuck, I'm not alone in the world. There's 2 other blokes talking about mental health. Maybe I can talk about it as well. There's a lot of your own story that you can be grateful for just tuning into it.
Yeah, I agree, mate. You got to do with what you've been given. I think this sort of stuff, especially mental health problems, it can go one or two ways. It can be either fucked down and you can feel like shit about it for the rest of your life and play into a victim mentality, which is what I was doing. You can take a bit of accountability. I'm big on accountability and it's not a malicious thing at all. It's just you take a bit of accountability, realize where you're at. Accountability to me, it doesn't equal responsibility. You don't have to take responsibility for all the bad things that have happened to you. Sometimes bad shit happens to innocent people, but you take a bit of accountability, realize where you are and realize that you're the only one that can change it and do something with that, and that'll make you a better person. It'll make you feel better as well. In my opinion, I think just sitting there and being beaten down and sad and looking for sympathy off everyone all the time and not making changes is just a bad fucking path to take. And it won't end well.
Yeah. And it does happen though. We have the peaks, we have the troughs as well. That's just part of the journey as well. It's just 100%. Recognizing when you're on the down and go, oh, yep, I've been down here too long. I've got to get back up again. And now your self-care, is it talking to someone? Is it meds? Is it whatever works for you?
And that's accountability right there. Figuring out you're allowed to have bad things that happen to you and feel like shit. Like that's fine. But if something bad happens to you and you're 3 years down the track and still can't function, then you really need to look at like what's going on and how to fix that, because it's not good. It's not good for anyone. And you're allowed to have bad times. Dude, I had a bad week last week. I was feeling like shit. I ate shit. Feeling like shit. I ate shit made me feel worse. And then I was like, what am I fucking doing? Like, why am I doing this? And, so I went to gym twice over the next 3 days, because I knew I had to, fix what I'd done. I think it's a very important thing is taking accountability.
So you mentioned before you were working in the death industry and you're seeing a lot of men in suicide. And you said that you wanted to do something about it. So what did you do about it? I know you've got Broski. Is that where Broski come from? Tell us a bit about this pathway.
So when I was working there, as I said, doing suicides every day and sometimes, 3 a day or whatever, picking up these people. And I was like, holy fuck, because it sort of takes away from the number. Like we always just see a number at the end of the year and it's not personalized, I guess. It's like, well, it's just a number. It doesn't have really any massive impact on people. But when you're actually picking these people up every day and seeing what it does to their families, it really sort of grabs you. And I was doing a course with a friend or whatnot. It was sort of a guy running a men's course, which I did. And I found it somewhat helpful and it was good. And I connected with a lot of blokes and said, I really want to do a podcast, which I'd been putting off for a long time. And that was inspired from that. And it stressed me out. So I just put it off. I didn't do it. I didn't take any action on it. And these dudes really encouraged me to do it. So I ordered the stuff and started this podcast and called it On the Men Podcast and did a couple episodes. And at that point in time, I was doing like the push-up thing as well. So I was doing a bit of stuff for mental health and I did a video on Facebook, and which I guess was where people probably started realizing that I actually had that mental health journey, because a lot of people, pretty much everyone, didn't know. So yeah, I started doing that. And then I thought, it was called Uniting Brothers, a page, which to me, I really liked. And then I started realizing it sounded more like a church group. And I was like, and people didn't really know what the fuck Uniting Brothers was. And I'd post a little bit of stuff there. And it was more just a way for me to say, if anyone wants to chat, then they can contact me. And at that point in time, my mental health wasn't super great anyway. So I was more just like looking for support and supporting others. And then that started to build a little bit. And I had a 6-month break from the podcast. I went through a bit of a hard time and I didn't think I should be talking about specific things in that mindset. So I stopped doing it for about 6 months and then was stopped doing the page. And then, yeah, I changed it up a bit and got back into it and changed the name to Broski, which is something I really enjoy. And I call lots of my friends Broski. A lot of my bloke mates Broski. So I thought that fits a little bit better. And started the podcast up again, got some advocates, started doing a local walk. We're introducing a men's Zoom call start of next year, which will be good. And yeah, just doing little things to help people. I get a lot of people on reach out to me on the page who are experiencing current crisis. So something's happened to them and they message the page like, I'm struggling and do you have any advice? And I'm very aware my advice is not for everyone and my page is not for everyone. I guess I like to talk about contentious issues and things that are maybe a little less politically correct, that sort of stuff. And some people don't like that. And they make it very, I get messages from people saying they don't like it, and which is fine. But some people get something from it and that's why I do it.
How do people find Broski? It's on Instagram because I'm pretty sure that's where we connected. Is it on Facebook? Do you have a website for it?
Yeah, so it's on Facebook. I don't use Facebook a lot, and I probably should for that page, but it sort of just sits there. I don't really upload any posts or anything to Facebook, but it's mainly based off Instagram. And in my bio, there's a link tree you can click on and go to different links. I'm doing Movember this year with a bunch of Ambo mates, so that'll be really good. You can go onto the website. We've got support services linked on there for different communities. So, we've got support services on there, people to call for, veterans, LGBTQ, other sort of things. I've got the podcast on there as well. We're planning on a few things next year, which are still secretive at the moment, but hopefully will be released in the next couple of months. So yeah, we're just growing slowly. I've got some really good brand advocates on at the moment, growing slowly. So you can find us on Instagram. It's probably the best place to go. And or our website, you can go to Broski HQ and find us there.
Awesome. And do you still do the clothing?
I've still got some clothing. Actually, when I started doing it, I didn't realize how much all this would cost. I started running some clothing to help. Yeah, dude, all this is funded by me and my job. So haven't got any sponsors for the podcast. Don't have any sponsors for Broski either. So yeah, I started selling clothing just to try and put a dent in some of the costs of everything. So I was selling hoodies, still got some hoodies. I've got some hats and t-shirts coming in as well. We'll be running some, most of the money goes to running events and other things and just sustaining the business. My sort of vision for Broski is, over the next 10 years is to sort of grow it into a company that provides additional services for men. So hopefully having some government-funded psychologists and Broski-funded and government-funded psychologists and subsidized courses for men that can, come in and, talk to a psychologist over Zoom or do a course or something like that. And also maybe having an on-call family violence or family lawyer on call as well, just to provide some support and some advice to men as well. That's very far away yet, but that's sort of where we're going with it. I want it to be a thing that maybe people can access in different states as well.
Yeah, I love the vision for it because it is needed in this space. And not only are you looking towards the future, but you're creating this sense of community for guys who often feel isolated. I love the idea about the walks. Talk us through the walks. Is that still happening?
Yeah, so we still do walks. We do walks once a month, and it's just down in Gippsland here. I've also spoken to a couple of advocates who are doing their own walks as well. They just sort of thought, we'll start a walk. I said, yeah, man, do it. We can advertise it on our page and whatnot as well. So yeah, they're just an hour and a half if people want to chat. Sometimes people don't want to talk about, mental health stuff, which is completely fine. We just talk about life in general or just have a bit of a joke and a laugh. Doesn't have to always be about, about the mental health stuff at all. And then if it's raining or whatever, we might walk, we'll just go grab a coffee and have a chat. And yeah, it's just about, I guess the biggest thing is about promoting healthy, active lifestyles whilst, in general, whilst also building mateship and brotherhood, which is what we're all about here. And talking about just contentious issues as well. I find a lot of guys want to talk about specific issues that, they feel uncomfortable about or aren't really seen as issues in society. And that's what Broski's really about. It's about talking about the hard issues and not just the easy stuff and the stuff that's accepted. So
I love that. And the more we talk about those hard issues, either in a group walk or through podcast, through therapy, the more we normalize some of this stuff as well. The more we can open up about men's mental health or even connection and loneliness. For guys to say I'm lonely, that is in itself a taboo topic. Because being lonely and saying you're lonely, that's not something that we're programmed to do. We're meant to just suck it up and move on and harden up and just deal with it. But for a lot of guys that are experiencing it, particularly guys I'm seeing on the socials and the different groups that I'm in doing FIFO work, they go away from home, they're away from home, away from family for weeks on end, and then doing long hours. Same with shift workers as well. They're away from everybody else as well. You might experience similar in your shift work.
Yeah, I mean, like, sometimes you don't get public holidays off and stuff like that. And, like emergency services have very high divorce rates and very high mental health problems as well. But, like so does construction industry, and construction industry's got massive like mental health problems. It's very prominent in there, like suicidality in the construction industry is huge. FIFO work as well, as you said. It's a big issue there as well. I think it's very important to talk about those issues. I'm not really educated, I guess, on the reasons why those industries, maybe more so I understand a bit more about emergency services, obviously, but maybe not so much construction and FIFO. But as you said, I think it is due to like being away from family. It's hard work as well. It's physically hard work. I don't think those industries offer a lot of mental health support. And maybe it is the tough it out sort of approach. They're male dominated industries, and maybe that is that approach as well. That approach, it doesn't work very well either. So yeah, I agree. I think like different things work for different people. And, like I get people contact me all the time saying, like, I feel bad for being a man. I feel bad for being masculine. And I'm big on that. I don't think there's anything wrong with masculine, or there's very little wrong with traditional masculinity as well. So, I think as long as you're being a good person and, you want to play, different roles or whatnot, there's nothing wrong with that. So like talking about those issues as well, gender-based issues, but also like maybe you do need to open up and talk as well. Maybe you need to embrace some of those other probably less traditional masculine things and more, feminine things, and open up and connect with people. I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. So it just depends on what the person needs. And, as you would know, you got to be very careful about what you sort of talk to people about and what you offer them as well, and the advice you give them, because, well, I'm not a professional at all in that field. I just use my own experience to sort of offer advice, I guess, and help. But I know there's been a couple of times people have contacted me and said, like, I'm going to take my life or something like that. And, it's very hard to navigate that because, one, you're not with the person, you don't know the person. And all you can really do is like say, you need to talk, like we need to get you around a support system. We need to get you some help or immediately. So it is difficult to navigate that stuff as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I have that in my own practice. So I have a mental health therapy business, and I have people calling me in crisis. And I have to say, I'm sorry, but this is not a crisis support line. Here are some numbers for crisis support lines that you can help you, who are better able to help you. That's not me. And that's okay in the mental health space as well. It's like we have to recognize our limits as well. But Josh, I could talk to you all the time. I love having our chats. They do go for a while. And I think if we were ever in the same room, we'd probably they'd have to pry us apart with crowbars or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully one day we will be.
We will be one day, and we'll get there. But we've had a deep and heavy conversation, and thanks so much for sharing your journey with the Mindful Men community. But I'd love to leave it off on something a little bit more positive. I always like to hear my guests plug something that makes them feel good. And it doesn't have to be anything to do with mental health or the death industry or anything that we've talked about. It could be just what you're listening to on the radio. Or I talked about that, the podcast I'm listening to with Hamish Blake at the moment, that's making me feel good. What's something that's making you feel good at the moment? I'm
going to have to go with something generic, but I mean, something makes me feel good. I love music, listening to music. So music and exercise, definitely, hands down at the moment, is keeping me on track and making me feel fucking amazing.
Awesome. Is there a particular song that you're really vibing with at the moment?
Yeah, so there's a local heavy metal band called Dream on Dreamer. They're split up now, but Hear Me Out. I love that song. I vibe to it at gym, and there's another band called Danger Kids. I love all music, man. Like I like opera, I like heavy metal, I like pop, I like everything. So, but yeah, those two songs at the moment I'm sort of vibing to at the moment. So
awesome, love it. Thanks. I might get the links for you if you've got some links to YouTube or something like that, and we'll put them in the show notes if that's all right.
Yeah, man, I can send you some links. Yeah, no problems.
Awesome. Oh, Josh, I'll let you go now, mate. Thanks so much for your time. I really have appreciated you sharing and being vulnerable and all that. And I look forward to catching up soon and seeing your progress with what you're doing with Broski and on the Men podcast as well. I'm really excited to see your growth, mate.
Thanks, brother. And just thank you for everything you do as well. You do a really good job. I love that you've got your business up and going. I know when last time we spoke, it was still in the works. You're getting your webpage up. You're doing a really good job, man. You've knuckled down. You're having a fucking crack, which is awesome. The podcast is going well. You should be really proud of yourself and the effect you're having on the community.
Cheers, mate. Thanks so much. I appreciate that.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, and I hope you got some value from it. If anything triggered your mental health today, please reach out to your support networks. Also, if you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your mates. For more from Mindful Men, you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll throw the links to these pages in the show notes below. But until next time, stay mindful.